Welcome into Outkick the Show. I am your fearless leader, Clay Travis. I hope you are having fantastic Thursdays wherever you may be across this great country or this great land. LeBron James gets called out by one of the leaders of the Hong Kong democracy protest. We will talk to you about NASCAR's decision to ban the Confederate flag. The coronavirus continues to decline even as the media tries to convince you that the world is going to end. Nikola Jokic, it's a hard name to say, is the exact opposite of Fat Sean Kemp. Christian McCaffrey has been in quarantine with Miss Universe, and he's got all sorts of wacky pool exercises that he's doing. I didn't even know this. And the PGA is back. I appreciate all of you. Thank you for hanging out with me. Let's start with LeBron James. Everybody wants to praise LeBron James for being so incredibly woke. Oh, LeBron, he's so brave. He's so brave. He's such an outspoken athlete. Everybody wants to praise LeBron. Well, what's interesting is LeBron is outspoken when it benefits his brand. And he says almost nothing when his money is actually impacted. And this was why he was exposed as a massive hypocrite around the China issue during the off season, right as the preseason was beginning for the NBA. LeBron was willing to talk trash about America and American politicians and everything, but the minute that China told him to shut up and dribble, he shut up and dribbled. He still hasn't said anything. Worse, he actually carried water for China. And I'm surprised, maybe I shouldn't be surprised, that this is getting almost no media attention. I'm going to talk about it as the lead on my radio show tomorrow, I promise you. But Joshua Wong, who is one of the leaders of the Hong Kong democracy protesters, and let's make it clear here that I believe the biggest story of our time is the United States battle against China. China is trying to prove to the world that their authoritarian dictator style of government is better than the United States democracy and human rights. And China is attempting to influence countries around the world. And during this coronavirus outbreak, which, by the way, China caused, they have taken over many of the rights that the Hong Kong protesters have been seeking to protest. In Hong Kong right now, under new laws that were passed by China, you can go to prison for 5 years for protesting. You can go to jail, to prison, for 3 years if you disrespect the Chinese national anthem. Okay? That's what Hong Kong protesters were protesting about. Here is what Joshua Wong said. Defending democracy is vital, but at King James, LeBron James, only talks loud in the U.S. On China, not only is he silent, he actively shuts others up. He called Daryl Morey, the Houston Rockets general manager, quote, misinformed and, quote, not really educated, quote, for supporting Hong Kong protests and democracy. All he cares about is money, not human rights. Hypocrite. That's pretty well delivered. Directly from a Hong Kong protester. LeBron, you'll recall, criticized Daryl Morey for supporting democracy and said, as this tweet characterizes, that Daryl Morey was misinformed and, quote, not really educated. Okay? Here is the deal. If you want to be on the right side of history, right? That's the obsession that everybody likes to talk about now. Are you going to be on the right side of history, the wrong side of history? The right side of history is in favor of human rights. There are billions of people around the world who don't have human rights today. Okay? All we needed to see from LeBron, and still needs to see from LeBron, is an endorsement of human rights around the world. He's not willing to do it because his pocketbook is threatened if he talks about China's failures when it comes to human rights. If he talks about their concentration camps, if he talks about the protesters potentially going to jail for 5 years, if he talks about not respecting the Chinese national anthem, 3 years in jail as well, it's the very foundation of a hypocrite. LeBron is in favor of things that help his wallet He doesn't actually stand up for anything that risks his wallet. Now, this is a big deal. Muhammad Ali was willing to risk everything in order to make his statements about the Vietnam War. LeBron James is not willing to risk anything. Worse than that, he's not even willing to stand up for people all around the world to have basic human rights. Even worse than that, he actively opposed Daryl Morey saying that the Hong Kong protesters who were protesting to try to avoid exactly what China has done, put them in jail for 5 years if they protest, put them in jail for 3 years if they don't support the Hong Kong the Chinese national anthem. It's a very fount of hypocrisy. And this is a big deal, all right? Theoretically, this is what the media exists to do. Expose hypocrisy. I want you to pay attention. How many members of the sports media are going to call out LeBron James for this hypocrisy? Sports media all claims, we've got to speak truth to a higher power, everything else. They're not calling LeBron James out. They're afraid of actually pointing out this blatant hypocrisy. Look, I'm disappointed in LeBron. If you want to use your platform to advance causes of justice, there are certainly imperfections in America, but we are the greatest country in the history of the world when it comes to human rights. Okay? You can point out flaws in America. We certainly are not perfect. But how in the world are you carrying water for China, which is attempting to outlast and overcome the United States of America over this issue? This is unbelievable to me that the sports media, by and large, will not call out LeBron. I give credit to Joshua Wong for pointing out the absolute hypocrisy here that almost no one in sports media will bring up. They're afraid to criticize LeBron James and point out that he is, beyond a shadow of a doubt, a hypocrite when it comes to human rights. He could easily speak out against China and make a tremendous difference for billions of people potentially around the world. He won't do it because he's afraid of Space Jam 2 not getting played in Chinese movie theaters. He could easily come out and say to Nike, instead of going overseas and paying people pennies on the dollar to make my equality sneakers, how about you make all of the shoes that we sell to people in America in the United States? He won't do it. LeBron James is a hypocrite. I wish he wasn't. I'd praise him to the high heavens if he was willing to call China out on their human rights abuses. He won't do it. This is pathetic. All right? Absolutely pathetic of LeBron James, but even more pathetic is the way most in the sports media won't pay attention to it. They will ignore it. They will pretend it didn't exist. It's really the exact opposite of what media should do. Speak truth to power. Don't run and hide from it. It's ridiculous. A couple of other things that I want to hit here. NASCAR, Confederate flag. NASCAR is making an intriguing decision here. All right, let me start with the Confederate flag. I'm a Civil War history buff. I would put my knowledge of the Civil War in the 99.9 percentile in America. I think it's 1 in 1,000, right? I am in the top 1,000. If you put 1,000 people out in the street and you quizzed us on the Civil War, I would be the last dude left standing. All right, my knowledge of American history is pretty sound. What has always disappointed me about the Confederate flag in general is the same thing that disappoints me about America in general. Most people in America don't have much historical knowledge. So I have always thought, if you're going to fly the Confederate flag, do you have any actual knowledge of history? If the answer is no, then you're just trying to be, I don't even know what point you're trying to prove, okay? So I have always thought that many of the people who are advocating for the Confederate flag, if you actually gave them a quiz on basic Civil War history, they would fail it, all right? So I'm looking at this entirely from a historic perspective. But NASCAR is making an intriguing decision here, okay? This is, I think, a really intriguing decision looking forward to try to think about it. Now, I'm not an expert on NASCAR. I've been to like one race in my life. So I'm not the person who's going to sit around and claim that they understand the NASCAR fan base and everything else. But NASCAR, and people who understand NASCAR better than me can point to it, NASCAR has lost a ton of its fan base over the last decade. That's fair to say, right? That fan base for NASCAR has vanished. And I think what you have to be careful of, and this is not just NASCAR, this is the larger universe in general, okay? You have to be careful if you're NASCAR in trying to appeal to a larger sports community that doesn't have any interest in you. You might lose the people who actually do have interest in you. And so I wonder, when I talk to NASCAR fans, they're like, NASCAR tried to go national. And do you remember when the NHL tried to go national and they had all the failure and they went down to Atlanta and they went out to Arizona and they went down to Florida and nobody cared about the NHL? Now it's a little bit better now, but it feels like to me NASCAR tried to take a big swing and turn into a national sport and it didn't happen. And worse than that for NASCAR, they lost all of their diehard support. And it seems to me like this is another example of NASCAR trying to grow the sport when in reality, you're setting yourself up for major challenges. For instance, do you really want to employ people to be driving around on the infield at NASCAR confiscating flags? That seems like it sets up opportunities for ridiculous scuffles, regardless of which side you're in favor of. And so I'm curious. I'll be watching the ratings in the years ahead. I'll be watching the attendance figures. They can't sell tickets to NASCAR now. Is NASCAR going to be growing their audience, or are they going to be alienating their audience? I don't know. I don't know what the overall outcome is going to be, but I do think that you have to be careful in trying to appeal to everyone that you end up appealing to no one. Because are more people going to go to NASCAR events now? I don't know. I've been to one in my life, so I'm not the target demographic. But I think you have to be careful as you make decisions to placate people. Are you really ever going to make them happy? Right? That's kind of the cancel culture in general. It never ends, right? And this is why I think a lot of people, I don't think it's crazy to say at the end of the slippery slope, are people going to be like, I demand that the Washington Monument be torn down. I demand that Washington have its name changed. I demand that the Jefferson Memorial be torn down as well because George Washington and Thomas Jefferson owned slaves. Is that going to be a reality at some point? Because I think that is where the cancel culture leads. It's never happy. The cancel culture is never like, oh, thanks for changing that. We're cool now. The cancel culture just moves from one thing to another. You see, the New York Times had a freaking article about Paw Patrol being canceled because one of the characters in Paw Patrol is a police officer. Cops and live PD, to my understanding, has been pulled off the television networks because some people have evidently decided that all cops are bad. This is lunacy, okay? This is not the way that reasonably intelligent adults respond. Gone with the Wind is off HBO Max. It's the first African American to ever win an Oscar, and it's now canceled. The thing that people who respond to cancel culture don't understand is cancel culture doesn't end. It continues forever. There's always something to be offended by. And when you allow cancel culture to win, they will not say, okay, cool, everything's great now. They will move on. And that's why I say I don't think it's lunacy for someone to say, wait a minute, George Washington and Thomas Jefferson owned slaves. Are we going to have to change the name of the nation's capital? Or why in the world does Thomas Jefferson have a memorial? It also always seems that situations like these all happen in election years. Out of nowhere in 2016, everything was a controversy. And now, out of nowhere in 2020, suddenly people are like, we got to stop Paw Patrol. This cancel culture all seems to skyrocket in an election year. And it is incredibly frustrating to me as a student of history that we decide to wipe out any elements of history. Like every time I see one of these statues come down, I think to myself, what is going on? Because we're just going from one ridiculous cancellation to another. And I don't get it. As someone who is a student of American history, as someone who would humbly put themselves in the 99th percentile of American history knowledge and the 99.9 percentile of certain aspects of American history, like the Civil War, I'm very disappointed by the overall historical lack of knowledge in leaders and in the way that we talk about subjects. Tearing down monuments is, I think, an atrocious decision. And look, I mean, you can go all the way back to Egypt. Slavery has existed throughout mankind's history. Should you tear down the pyramids because they were built by slaves? Should you adopt the same standards of theocracies in the Middle East that are destroying images that they consider to be craven because they offend their religion? I don't think that cancel culture is anything to be proud of, regardless of where cancel culture is coming from. And I've been saying the same thing for years. There is a difference between I disagree with you and I disagree with you, and you should no longer be able to have an opinion. This is one reason why I'm happy that I founded my own company. I didn't know cancel culture was going to rise up 11 years ago when I founded Outkick. But my God, am I glad that I own my own media company. Because come hell or high water, I've always got that media company. But it's a crazy world that we're living in now where people are not happy if anybody says, wait a minute, let's just talk about this. It's like, no, my feelings are hurt. You're offending my feelings by even discussing it. And I just don't know where it ends. That's the thing. That's why I think you can literally take the slippery slope argument and ride it all the way down to the Jefferson Memorial or the Washington Monument. There are people already advocating for sandblasting that out of existence, tearing it all down. It's insanity to me. Absolutely insanity. A couple of other thoughts here. Let's have some fun. Nikola Jokic is now super skinny. It appears that he is going to be the exact opposite of fat Shawn Kemp. For those of you who are younger, the NBA had a lockout back in the day. And one of the most amazing things about the NBA in general was when they came back from that event, they came back with some guys who looked totally different. And one of them was Shawn Kemp, who looked like he had eaten skinny Shawn Kemp and doubled in size. And now we got pictures up on Outkick. It appears that there are a lot of people out there, when you actually start to look at it, there are a lot of people out there that are wondering who else might be out of shape. Well, Nikola Jokic has managed to turn into skinny Jokic, and we'll see how that impacts his game going forward if he actually shows up. And by the way, the NBA players are now not happy with the Orlando quarantine, and the Orlando quarantine doesn't make sense because the NBA basically is implementing a plan that would have made sense in April, and they are now implementing it in August. It's just nonsensical when you actually break down what the NBA is doing. You're going to be able to go to all these different amusement parks, and the NBA is going to be playing inside of a bubble. And so a lot of players are not upset with it. I don't blame them. Are upset with it. Sorry, I think they should be playing in their home arenas and staying in their home cities. There's absolutely no reason to be playing in a bubble in Orlando when you can go to Disney World or Legoland or, I mean, imagine this, when you're going to be able to go to NFL games or you're going to be able to go to college football games and the NBA is going to be playing in a bubble. It doesn't make any sense at all. Now, coronavirus continues to decline. I told you this was going to happen. If you go back and read my tweets, if you go back and watch these shows, I told you that as soon as the protests left the stage, as soon as the protests and the riots and everything surrounding that disappeared as a story, and it's basically happened, I told you that there was going to be a resurgence in the media of, oh my God, there's a second wave. And they were going to pick a couple of cities or a couple of states, and they were going to tell you that it was unsafe to open back up. So I told you, and that's what's happening. And the media is so desperate to terrify you that they will cycle wherever the most terrifying story is and make sure that they cycle back to it over and over and over again. And I told you their pivot was going to be, well, we had some new cases emerging somewhere new, because you knew that the trend lines were all moving in a good direction. And that remains the case. In fact, I'm actually more encouraged this week than I was before the week started. And that is because the coronavirus cases aren't actually going up. In the nation, so far this week, they have actually gone down. And that's despite the fact that we had hundreds of thousands or millions of people out protesting in the streets. To me, this is a positive, because it means that we can have outdoor sporting events in big numbers and not have to worry about all of the cases exploding in a negative way. And so if you think about it and start to look through the numbers, maybe it's going to happen, but the average contagion period is 4 to 5 days. And so if the average contagion period is 4 to 5 days, then already we would be seeing a massive increase in the overall number of coronavirus cases, and we're just not seeing that. And so this is a really good sign, in theory, for being able to go to sporting events outdoors, that things are not actually moving in a negative direction. Okay? This is a really intriguing story to be following, but the media continues to be doing a really bad job of actually covering it. PGA is back today. Golf should have been back even sooner than it is, but props to the PGA for returning to action today. PGA, NASCAR, UFC, boxing, NBA, MLS, Major League Baseball, all of it is going to be back. The Major League Baseball Commissioner, Rob Manfred, said he 100% guaranteed that baseball was going to be back. How many games are going to be played is the question, not whether baseball is going to be back. I can't wait to see what is actually going to happen when we have all of these going at the same time. August, September, October, November, December, January, February. We're never going to have seen a wilder 6 or 7 months of sports action than what we are about to see, with everything officially being back. So this is going to be a very big positive for American sports fans in the near future when everything is back. And we will have fans at college football games. We will have fans at NFL games. I believe just about everywhere is going to be willing to have fans present, okay, for these games. Finally, guy who's probably had a better quarantine than you, Christian McCaffrey, now the highest paid running back in the history of the NFL. I didn't even realize this. He's been quarantining with Miss Universe. So Christian McCaffrey, in addition to being the highest paid running back in the history of the NFL, he is now, amazingly, also quarantining with Miss Universe. So if you're wondering who had the best quarantine life of anybody out there on the entire planet, the answer may well be Christian McCaffrey, because he signed a contract to become the highest paid running back in the history of the NFL. And as if that were not enough, he also managed to quarantine with Miss Universe. Props to Christian McCaffrey. I think he wins the award for greatest quarantine of all time. That is pretty outstanding by him. All right, I love all of you. Tomorrow, I will be doing a really fun event at Zany's in Nashville. I will be with Adam Carolla as his podcast guest. We should have a lot of fun there. It is live and open to the public at 7 p.m. Zany's in Nashville, me and Adam Carolla. You can then see his stand-up afterwards. He was great on the radio show this morning. If you haven't gone and subscribed and listened to the podcast, Adam Carolla, absolutely fantastic. Make sure that you sign up for the podcast. Give me a 5-star review. If we read it, we will give you an autographed copy of my book. So, lots of great stuff. If you're already cutting out of work early, it's Thursday night. Have a fantastic weekend. I will see hopefully some of you tomorrow at Zany's with Adam Carolla, and I'll be on the radio show tomorrow morning, as always, 6 to 9 a.m. Eastern. I am Clay Travis. This is Outkick the Show. Kisses, DBAP, unless you need to SBAP. See y'all. Love you. Thank you, Facebook.